Expected hail the day of full release. Zion's walls are now erected, and the watchmen publish peace. Throughout Shiloh's wide dominion, hear the trumpet loudly roar. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen. Babylon is fallen to rise no more.
So, Mr. Yu, before we start this interview, do I have your explicit consent to record this conversation as well as to upload it publicly on YouTube?
Yes, you do.
Wonderful. So, my first question for you is, what inspired you to be a teacher?
Well, I worked as a classroom assistant in a grade 8 class after I finished university. And I worked for a very dedicated, experienced teacher who was very supportive of everything I did. And the kids I worked with, some of them were pretty tough, but for the most part, they were pretty good kids. And I think that just working one-on-one with one of the kids that I worked with helped me see that this is something I should be doing. And I got a lot of encouragement from her as well to maybe pursue it as something that, I could do a lot of good in the teaching profession outside of just being an EA, right? So working with groups of kids and making a difference. So yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. And I've always wanted to work with kids. I went to school for psychology. And even though it didn't work out for me for being a child psychologist, I think that becoming a teacher was kind of the next stepping stone. And working with those group of kids kind of helped inspire me to move towards that path. So.
Can you speak to more of your process of how you became a teacher?
Well, I worked another year under another teacher, and that was completely different from the one that I worked with previously. This teacher was very inexperienced. She didn't really know what she was doing, and she didn't really connect with the kids. And it was a difficult environment to kind of work in. Part of me, maybe, I don't know, not to boast to say that, I could probably do a better job of that. So I think with the process, I think I just I applied to a number of different universities. I was actually in Regina, Saskatchewan at the time. And so I applied to Ontario because it was a 1-year program. And I felt that was the best route for me. So I applied to 3 universities and got accepted to the University of Windsor. And then from there, I moved from Saskatchewan to Windsor and did my 8 months out there. Went back to Regina. Didn't have a lot of luck finding a job teaching. So then I tried my luck out in Alberta for a little bit, just supply teaching, and I worked with various grades out there. I worked with grade 12s, I worked with grade 9s, I worked with grade 2s, I worked with grade 7s and 6s. So I had a lot of experience in 4 months. And then by the time things didn't really work out there for me as far as permanent, I decided to come to Ottawa, and I applied to the board here, got accepted right away, did some supply teaching for a couple months, got some long-term contracts, and then that eventually led to me getting a permanent contract 2 years after I got here. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Is Cedarview Middle School, well, obviously not with what you said, it's not your first school you taught at, so I guess the question is, how has other schools you've taught at compared to Cedarview? Tell me about your whole experience with the other schools you've been through and how that is compared to now.
Okay, so I worked at Sir Winston Churchill Public School to start with. I had some great years there. It was a different and interesting mix of kids because we had kids from the Meadowlands, Maryville area and kids from Barrhaven and that was before Longfields opened. So it was a good mix of kids, but you had some kids that were very, very difficult, had some very difficult backgrounds, difficult family lives. But I mean, you see it in all the schools that you go to now. So I did about probably a good 7 years there. It was about 7 years. And then I left there because Longfields opened and there was a surplus situation. So I got bumped out. I did a year over at Stephen Leacock in Canada. And that was a French immersion center, so it was all ETFI, right? So I did English, French immersion, math. So those kids were very eager, very, on top of their game. But yeah, there were still some challenges in there, but not to the extent that I saw at Sir Winston when I was there. And then I came to Cedarview, and Cedarview was just, it was just generally a nice group of kids to begin with. Very upper white middle class, let's just say, to begin with when I started there. But the kids were just nice, polite for the most part, but now it's starting to change, right? The demographics at school is starting to change a lot more. We're getting a lot more multicultural in school. Mm-hmm. So that brings some different challenges in school as well. But it's changed a lot in the last 4 years, I would say. And it's almost comparable to my time when I was at Winston now. So, but it's probably in the beginning it was a lot different. It's kind of like Cedarview is kind of like the golden castle of schools for middle schools. But now it's kind of fallen into the kind of same categories a lot of middle schools, in my opinion, anyways. So, but yeah, it's still a lot of good kids that go there. But things have changed a lot in the last 3 years because of COVID. So, but I think that it's going to hopefully start to get better now that we're kind of out of that whole lockdown mode kind of thing. So kids are starting to come back to in person, understanding how things work, and getting involved with things in the school as well. So yeah.
It's good that you bring up the kids, because my next question here is, well, first of all, I should preface with remind us, how long have you been working as a teacher?
I've been a teacher for over 20 years now.
Over 20 years. So in your 20 years of teaching experience, how has this current generation of students compared to all the other previous generations of students you've worked with?
They're going to have a lot of challenges, if I'm being honest. COVID didn't help with any of that. Spending a lot of time online, it's not good for kids. They don't develop social skills that they need, that they would get being in person. And yeah, social media wasn't as prevalent as it is now when I first started teaching. Kids didn't have access to social media accounts. They didn't even have access really to phones. So they knew how to kind of talk to each other in classes and things like that. But nowadays, they're always on their phones. We don't allow them to have phones in classes anymore. We put a ban on that last year because it was kind of necessary. Mm-hmm. A lot of these kids are about kind of like defending themselves and things like that. So we've had a lot of fights break out at the school in the last couple of years.
Like physical fights?
Physical fights.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And a lot of them are pulling their phones out to record the fights rather than going to get help. So these kids are going to have a lot of challenges in terms of understanding why rules are in place, understanding how they have to contribute to society in a positive light. Compared to the other generations knew when you talk to them, they understood that, you got to work to get to where you are, whereas a lot of these kids now, they have this very entitled attitude, and they don't really want to put in the effort. They're more concerned about their electronics and being on social media accounts and things like that, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how they turn out to be as adults. I'm not overly optimistic, but maybe things will turn around for them in a couple of years. So hopefully.
So given that you are already looking into your glass ball over here with students, it brings me to my next question here, which is, what unique insights, perspectives, or points of view do you hold from your time as a teacher?
I think kids do need a lot of encouragement at school. There's a lot more kids now, especially because of the last 3 years, how much division it's caused between families, friends, and people in communities. They need to understand that there needs to be a sense of community in a school, and they need to be a part of that. There's not as much of that anymore, and I feel that kids are I don't know, not just kids. It's just I think people nowadays have become more selfish. It's kind of a jaded way to look at things. But you try to teach, like what I'm trying to teach kids now at school. It's not really about the academics. It's just about being good people, being kind to each other, because a lot of that's been lost over the last few years. And I'm interested to see how things turn out for these kids in the next 3 to 4 years, because they, like I said, they have a lot of challenges, and not a lot of that isn't self-inflicted. A lot of that has to do with what's going on at home. A lot of these kids come from broken homes now. There's a lot of problems. The parents are having issues, mental health issues, dealing with things, so they're not there for the kids like they should be. So you're picking up a lot more weight of becoming not just a teacher, but just as a parent as well at school, right? So you're trying to teach them values on a daily basis, and it's a lot of the kids that I taught in the early parts of my career, they had those values coming in. A lot of them don't now, so it's a lot of it is just, it's very I don't know, it's difficult to go in some days, but at the same time, when you get a positive thing coming out of the day, that's what you're kind of working towards, right? So if you make a breakthrough with certain kids who are having trouble on a daily basis and giving them a positive end to their day, that's what kind of makes it worthwhile. So, yeah.
So you bring up how children, or in this particular day and age, a lot of children are coming from broken homes. That gets me to wonder, in your opinion, do you think that it is the teacher's role to act as a guardian of sorts, or is that asking too much of the teacher?
I think it's reasonable to ask sometimes, but right now I think there's a certain extent that you can be asked to do as a teacher, almost as a surrogate parent, right? Whereas I think now we're being asked too much, if we're being honest. I mean, you're there to coach them, you're there to give them help with their homework. But if they're having a hard time regulating their emotions and their behaviors, that's something that, we can teach them. But at the same time, it's gotten a point now with some of these kids coming in where they're trashing classrooms, they're throwing furniture, they're throwing things at teachers.
Wait, hold on. Students are throwing things at teachers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's happening. I'm sure it's happening. Yeah, but the systems, not allowing us to suspend kids anymore, because it's become kind of progressive discipline is what they call it. So it's kind of like a 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. But it takes a lot to get to that 3rd strike. And because a lot of these kids are coming in with a lot of mental and emotional baggage, we have to be sensitive to that as well, right? So I myself haven't experienced a kid throwing anything at me yet. So I've made a pretty good connection with a lot of these kids that are having some of these issues, but at the same time, I mean, it's becoming way more prevalent now where we have kids like this in our schools, and I feel that we're being asked way too much sometimes in terms of helping them understand how to control their emotions, control their reactions to things. And when you speak to the parents, you understand why, because it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of parenting going on. Or if there's issues with the parents at home, maybe there's mental health issues with the parents, other things like that come up, right? Or separated homes, things like that. That doesn't help kids either. A kid doesn't come from a stable home. That has a huge impact on them, especially with COVID happening in the last 3 years. They need something consistent at school. So that's what we give them. But at the same time, we can't be really asked to do all the things that parents do. Some of these kids come without lunches. We can't be feeding them on a daily basis, right? Because we only have so many resources for things like that, right? So, but yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. So we are being asked, I think, a lot more than we should be asked. And then on top of that, trying to teach the kids in the class that are there to learn, who want to learn, who are doing everything that they should be. But when you're constantly putting out fires in the class, it makes it hard to get any kind of teaching done, right? So it's become way more prevalent in the last couple of years that that's happening now in a lot of classrooms, in a lot of schools, right, all over the world. So, yeah.
Do you feel that teaching has changed, for lack of a better word, within your 20 years of teaching? Anything that's changed with the profession? Any comments or criticisms that you have of other teachers, not in specific, but just of the career as a whole, if that makes sense?
Yeah, makes sense. I think it has changed. We're being asked to do a lot more now, more than I remember. Being asked to do when I first started. We had kids that, dealt with a lot of issues that happened during the school year, right? But we're also having to be asked to support a lot of these kids who have learning disabilities and things in the class where we don't have the support like we used to. It used to be that we would have a teacher come in, take them out, reteach some things, do some things one-on-one with them, but we don't have those resources anymore. So we're being asked to do the work with those kids, then the middle kids that are kind of struggling with some things, but not really, but still have questions, and then the kids that are keeners, but still have questions. So you're dealing with all of that in like a 60-minute period. And a lot of these kids don't have a lot of the self-starting skills anymore. They don't initiate a lot of things with their work. You're constantly having to push them to get started, right? So it's not like before you tell them, okay, this is your work, this is what you need to work on. And yeah, kids were always chatty and social and things like that. But there's just some kids that just sit there and do nothing for the entire period. You're constantly having to poke and prod at them to get started. And you can't expect teachers to be able to teach kids how to do that. So a lot of that stuff is intrinsic for kids. A lot of them don't have that anymore. And you're constantly having to say that same thing to the same kids every day about getting started on their work when they have the time to do it, not using their time productively, asking questions when they're not sure about something, taking extra time to review their work, things like that. But a lot of them don't do that anymore. So it's changed in that sense because the kids they're not self-starters like they used to be. A lot of the time in my career, the kids, they knew what they had. This is what you have to do. This is how you get started. Now get to it. Now it's like you got half your class. You have to really light a fire under them to get them going on anything. So there's just not a whole lot of urgency with these kids in terms of understanding that it's not so much about the academics. It's more about the work ethic. They don't understand how to build that skill, for themselves. So, yeah.
How have you found your life has been affected by becoming a teacher? Do you think that you would have gone in a different direction if you decided not to be a teacher? Do you think teaching has had a positive or negative impact on your life? Those sort of questions.
Well, it's had a positive impact, I think. Honestly, can't see what else I could do right now. I mean, as bad as, some of last year was for me, I think it gave me a lot of perspective in terms of what I needed to do to either change my outlook on the way I do things. Because it used to be that I tried to reach every kid in the last couple of years. That's changed. And it's not because I'm bitter about the profession or jaded by the profession, but I'm realizing now that you can't reach every kid. There's just kids that they don't care. They know that no matter what they do, you can't fail them. Or what they don't do, you can't fail them, right? So, but I think for the most part, the good always outweighs the bad. There's been way more positives in my career than negatives. And, I think a lot of it, I see a lot of it when I get contacted by former students, just to say hi or to say thank you or, even to help them out with a project, right? So things like that, right? So no, I think it's definitely had a positive influence in my life. I have a better understanding of kids. I have a better understanding of how to approach things in a calm manner, right? As much as maybe some days I'll freak out on a class or something, but when I sit down and speak to individual kids in a calmer manner, I feel I can reach them a lot better that way than sitting there and yelling at them or tearing a strip off on both sides, right? So, but you take a more calm approach, and I think that's important that you do that in the profession. The kids respond better to that, so I feel that yeah, I feel it's had a very positive. It has positive influence on my relationship at home with my wife. And I think it's been a good thing for me. I don't know what else I could really do right now. So, but it's something I'll have to think about after I retire. If I want to keep doing it after I retire, or I want to look at something that's maybe similar to it, where maybe I'm, consulting with people and consulting with kids or things like that. So that's something to maybe think about as well too.
And my final question for you is, do you have any closing comments, anything that you want people who are listening to this to know, anything you want to say?
I think people that misunderstand the profession need to understand that it's not just a 9 to 5 job. It's or a 9 to 3 to 3:30 job, whatever you want to define it as. And yeah, we get our vacations, we get our summers off, things like that. But the amount of work that we have to put in a year with kids, trying to get them to be, good citizens in the world, 10 months isn't enough to get that kind of a job done. And the problem with the kids is that they'll have maybe a great teacher 1 year, and then the next year, everything that was done for them or everything they were working towards could get blown up because they have a teacher that they don't connect with, that's lousy, that treats them poorly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kids need to be treated, like human beings, first of all. But at the same time, there's a lot of kids that are coming in now that are challenging the profession, challenging teachers and things like that. And it's not just going in and babysitting with them, which a lot of people have that kind of view on teaching. That's what it is. And it's not that at all. So most days when I go home, I don't even want to think about the job when I get home. The last thing I want to look at is a piece of marking but you always have to be on top of posting assignments for the kids, making sure they're updated on things, updating parents on things that are going on, and things like that. So it's not just a 6-hour day. It's constant. And teaching isn't just something that you get right away. It's a lifelong process. I'm learning things every year about myself as a teacher and about my students every year. You have to approach every class you have differently, right? You can't just treat them all the same. That's not how it works in the profession. So I think it's had a really good influence on me as a person. But I think a lot of people misunderstand the profession. They don't understand the kind of stuff that we see on a daily basis. Like I've always said, I challenge everybody. Anyone who thinks the job is easy should come in my class for 1 day to see how they handle it. Mm-hmm. So it's not the same every day. It's always something different. So. And that's what I enjoy about it, is that there's always variety. No day is ever the same, So something always comes up or something always happens every day that kind of makes you, either laugh, cry or get angry. But it varies from day to day. You never know what to expect, so it's very unpredictable. So, but yeah, I think people need to understand that about the profession. It's not the same thing every year. It's not the same thing every day. 10 months may not seem like a lot of time to be in a classroom, but some years it feels like a lot longer than 10 months, right? So people need to understand that. It's not about the money. It's not about the time off. It's about the time you spend trying to make those 10 months worth it for the kids that are under your care for 5 days a week, 30 to 40 hours a week, right? So yeah.
I want to thank you, Mr. Yu, for going out of your way to take part in this interview. You've been amazing, and I wish you the best in, what'd you say, 9 more years till retirement?
9 more years.
Yes, I want to wish you the best in your remaining 9 years.
Well, thank you, Logan. I appreciate you getting in touch with me. It's really nice to kind of have a candid talk about the profession. I don't think I get enough chances to do that, especially with former students. So. Thank you so much.
You've been too kind.
Yeah. Thank you.
Zion, Christ is come a second time, ruling with a rod of iron, all who now as foes combine. Babel's garments we've rejected, and our fellowship is o'er. Babylon is fallen, is fallen, is fallen.